All right, well, hopefully you saw it. That was not negative reinforcement that Sheldon was referring to. He was going to invoke punishment, which is a different principle. It's, you know, anytime you see the word reinforcement, whether it says positive or negative in front of it, reinforcement means that it is an outcome that will make the behavior more likely. Positive doesn't mean good, negative doesn't mean bad. Positive means you're going to be adding something that the learner likes. Negative means you're going to be taking away something the learner doesn't like. All right. Let's use a nice example. This is not my granddaughter. I could probably get a picture of my granddaughter looking like that, but I got this off the internet. This child does not look happy. Let's talk a little bit about how temper tantrums might be a good example of what we call a cycle of mutual reinforcement, where the child's getting reinforced for her tantrum behavior and the parents are getting reinforced for their giving in behavior. So the child has a temper tantrum until they get what they want. It's positive reinforcement for them. They want, you've got this child at the park. They don't want to leave. They throw a fit. So mommy and daddy say, okay, well, 5 more minutes and then we really have to go, right? So the child gets more time at the park. That's positive reinforcement. The child is getting a desirable outcome that they want. The parent gets reinforced for giving in like that through negative reinforcement. I can make this punishing temper tantrum go away if I just stay here 5 more minutes, right? You may have seen this at the grocery store where the child is having a fit because they want something at the checkout stand, or they want the toy that they passed and mom won't give it to them or whatever. If mom ultimately gives the child what they want just to get them to stop having this temper tantrum at the store, the child has been positively reinforced for the temper behavior, and the parent has been negatively reinforced for the giving in behavior. So I can make the punishing, embarrassing tantrum go away if I just give the child what they want. And you can imagine how, because it's a cycle, this means it's always going to be going on. And so one of the best things that you can do with a future offspring, if you have one, or if you already have kids, to thwart temper tantrums is to, once you've made a decision that the answer is no, is to, no matter what the child does, you do not give in. Like, nope, I said no. Okay, you can flip out. I would challenge you, if your child is screaming and having a fit, to make eye contact with the other shoppers and stuff, and most of them will understand. Most people have had children doing that. I've had my children do it. Everybody's had that experience. You cannot get out of toddlerhood without a tantrum. That's all there is to it. Reinforcing successive approximations. Ooh, that's the way Skinner originally described this principle that we call shaping. Shaping is where you reward the behavior as it comes closer and closer to the desired behavior. So you're trying to take this learner who has really no idea what you want from them, and you're trying to teach them what the desired behavior is. So you have to give them a reward for doing even like the barest minimum version of the behavior, and then they have to get a little closer before they get a reward. Then they have to get a little closer to the desired behavior. So you're always kind of changing the rules so that you can kind of push them to ultimately learn the behavior. A great example of that is, a lot of dogs are scared to go through these kinds of tunnels that you see agility dogs go through. And so they'll kind of balk and they won't go through it. So what you'll notice that this tube or this tunnel can be collapsed. Usually what you do is you start off by training the dog just to go through it when it's completely collapsed and it just looks like a hoop. So they're just going through the hoop. Then you open it up so they have to go through like 6 inches of tunnel, then 12 inches of tunnel, then, 2 feet of tunnel, and then 3 feet of tunnel, right? And it keeps getting bigger and bigger till now the dog can run through a 6-foot long tunnel. Now, of course, you have to reward the behavior each time along the way. So whatever this dog likes should be on the other end of the tunnel every time. So when they go through it and it's just a hoop, they get whatever the reward is. A lot of times it's a food treat, or it's a click with a clicker, or it's whatever the dog finds rewarding. Then when you expand the tunnel a little bit, they get that treat, and they don't get the treat if they balk and won't go around the tunnel. The only way they get it is by going through the now 6-inch deep tunnel. And you keep doing that until it gets farther and farther, until it's, like I said, 6 feet, and the dog can do it without any trouble. That's what we call shaping. because with a dog, you can imagine they don't really know what the intention is. Their instinct might tell them not to go into a tunnel, but they also know that they should probably be doing what you tell them to do. And so, they've got this conflict going on. So if you can kind of give them a reward for doing even the closest, just like the smallest version of it, like just go through this hoop, that seals in their mind, okay, clearly they want me to go through here, right? And then you can push them farther and farther to points where they wouldn't have been able to do it if you had tried that straight out. I accidentally shaped my dog to be able to jump a 6-foot fence. That was not my intention. I had a border collie lab mix, and we put her into the backyard, and it was like a 4-foot high brick wall. And so we weren't sure if she could jump that high. And found out the next morning when we found her on the front porch that yes, she can jump that high. So we go, okay, neighbors, do you mind if we put some kennel fencing up, and we'll make it like 5 feet so it won't be too obstructive, and it'll be, kennel fencing so you can see through it and it won't be too bad. And they're like, yeah, keep your dog out of our yard. So we approve. So we put this 5-foot kennel fencing up, and it took the dog a little while, but she ultimately figured out how to get over the 5-foot kennel fencing. So we went back to the neighbors and we said, do you mind if we, pull that down and we make it 6 feet tall? Because she used to live in a backyard with 6 feet fences, and she'd never jumped over that. So I'm pretty sure this will be the end of it, 6 feet. So we did that, put that up, and it took her a lot longer, like maybe a month, and she finally figured out how to get over the 6-foot fence. And I was like, wow, that was awesome shaping that we just accidentally did with this dog, where we took a dog who couldn't jump 6 feet, and over the course of like 2 months, now she can. That was not our intention at all. What we ultimately had to do was this was back in the days when people didn't put their dogs in crates. And so we had to build like an enclosure that she couldn't go over the top. It had a roof and everything. And then we discovered she could really dig effectively. So that was not really super awesome. But so rewarding the behavior, if it's even kind of close to what you're looking for, and then start raising the bar. This is how they train killer whales to do tricks. This is, you can get really elaborate behavior through this kind of shaping. Imagine that you've probably been shaped in your life towards different kinds of behaviors, and without knowing it. Maybe even the people who were shaping you weren't doing it on purpose, right? But you were being rewarded for certain behaviors, and those behaviors became more and more specific as you went. All right, now let's shift over to talking more about like what reinforcers are and what kinds of reinforcers there are. There are what we call primary reinforcers that are reinforcers that are just intrinsically desirable. They're ones that meet basic needs, like food is a primary reinforcer. You don't have to learn that it's rewarding, things like that. Sex is a primary reinforcer. Having fun is. Having attention, positive attention, having power. All of these are examples of things that people don't have to learn to want. They are just intrinsically desirable. Secondary reinforcers, or as Skinner referred to them, conditioned reinforcers, are reinforcers that you learn to want. You learn to want them usually because they have some kind of association with a primary reinforcer. A really great example of a secondary reinforcer is money, right? And if you think about it, money has an association with all the primary reinforcers that you could possibly think of, because you can almost all of them buy or get better access to those things the more money you have. Like money will get you almost all these things. So it's a great example of a secondary reinforcer. So some reinforcers are natural and others you have to learn. One that I really strongly recommend that you use if you're ever trying to shape a child's behavior is to use, they don't really necessarily understand money per se. So I like to use a token economy where you give them, I gave my son little buttons for, doing the chores and the homework and things that he was supposed to do around the house. And each one of them had a button associated with it. And I had very carefully calculated it so that, however many things he was required to do in the daytime was just enough buttons to earn him an hour of video game play in the evening, right? So that he had to turn in all of his day's buttons if he wanted to play a video game for an hour. That's a great example of a secondary reinforcer. Buttons mean nothing to most kids. Like why would you want to have a pocket full of buttons, except for that he got to do something that he found very intrinsically desirable, fun, right? Playing video games. And so lots of different ways to have secondary reinforcers. They don't have to be naturally things that exist out in the world and somebody else created. You can make your own. Another kind of reinforcement issue has to do with delayed reinforcers. If you look at like a puppy or something, even a dog, an adult dog, really needs immediate reinforcement. Small children need immediate reinforcement. When they do a desirable behavior, you better have that treat on hand or that clicker in your hand, because if you don't immediately give them feedback, they're not going to know what they're getting reinforced for. You, on the other hand, you can learn from delayed reinforcers, so delayed that you can get this piece of paper that promises a secondary reinforcer that you could then use for a primary reinforcer. I mean, like, you can have your reinforcements so far separated from your behavior and still learn from it, right? Like, you can still see that as, I was in a focus group thing, and we had a chance to win a Amazon gift card for participating in it. And I participated, and then literally 3 months later, I found out that I was the one who won the raffle. And I was like, oh, right on. Like, that was a delay. 3 months later, I got rewarded for participating in that focus group. I mean, us humans can really learn from delayed reinforcers. Now, we're going to talk more about delaying gratification later on in class as a personality characteristic. But, being able to delay gratification, that's something that you can really train. Like, you can make a dog wait. They know that their treat is coming, but you can make them wait for it, make them sit, make them lay, whatever. And if they do it for whatever length of time, then you can give them their treat. Now, I don't think we're going to have a dog, really setting up longer term goals per se, whereas a child, ultimately, as they age, are going to grow into that capability. So encouraging, children to have delayed gratification opportunities really helps them as they get older to continually delay gratification in service of longer term goals. How often should we reinforce? I got a picture of a pigeon because Skinner used them so often, but how often should we reinforce? Well, when you're first trying to teach the learner what you want, you should probably reinforce every single time they display the behavior that you want, because you're trying to get the learner to figure out what you want and then do that behavior, right? So they acquire that desired behavior really quickly when every single time they do it, they get reinforced. So if you're trying to teach a dog to sit, every single time their butt hits the floor, anytime after you've said the word sit, you give them the treat, whatever the reward is. Every single time. That way they make an association between the word sit and their butt being on the floor, right? Like it works really, really quickly that way. They make that association. But imagine if every single time you said sit, you had to have some kind of food treat on hand to give your dog, who then is consuming dog treats all day. Like, this doesn't sound like we can manage this over the long term, right? And you definitely can't with humans. You can't reinforce them every single time they do the desirable behavior, because they're going to get tired of the reinforcements. In the case of food treats, they're going to, gain too much weight. Like, this is not good. So luckily, there's partial or intermittent reinforcement available, and that's where you give rewards some of the time. I wouldn't recommend starting out with partial or intermittent reinforcement where the learner doesn't know if they're going to get rewarded or not. You want to make sure that you start off continuous and then shift to partial, because otherwise learning will take too long on the partial reinforcement schedule. But if you switch from continuous to partial, your learner will stick with that behavior a lot longer after the last reward, because they don't know if this is just a dry period where I'm just not getting rewarded right now. So let me show you the different schedules. So we can do our partial or intermittent reinforcement based on time. We call this the interval strategy. So you give a reinforcement based on some interval of time. A fixed interval schedule, they get reinforced every 5 minutes or every 30 seconds or every 2 days or whatever the interval is. With a variable interval schedule, you don't know how much time is going to have to pass before the interval ends. So it could be 5 minutes this time, it could be 2 days. You don't know how long the interval is going to be as the learner. So variable interval. Ratio is, how times do they have to display the behavior before they get the reward. Fixed ratio, they have to do so many behaviors in order to get rewarded. So they have to do every 5 times they do it, they get rewarded. A variable ratio schedule, you don't know how many times you have to do it. So you might do it 5 this time, and then you have to do it 1,000. Then you do 30, and then it's 35. And then, you don't know how many times you're going to have to do the behavior before you get rewarded. All right. I've set you up. You can review my explanation and know that we're going to play a little game called Which Schedule of Reinforcement Is This in the next video.